Good evening. Welcome to This Week in Turkey. Tonight, we will be speaking about Turkey's foreign policy with the veteran journalist Cengiz Çandar. Çandar currently is a distinguished visiting scholar at the Stockholm University Institute for Turkish Studies. Welcome, Mr. Çandar.
Good evening.
It's a pleasure having you here tonight.
As well as for me.
I want to start with quite a broad question and about Turkey's foreign policy. We know that former Minister of Foreign Affairs and also former Prime Minister Ahmet Davutoğlu had a certain vision about Turkey's foreign policy, and also he had a significant power inside the foreign policy establishment. So now, at the current moment, I want to ask you, who and or which institutions shape Turkey's foreign policy, and what is their vision? I mean, like broadly, I'm asking you to give us a brief picture of Turkey's position at international affairs and who are the most important power holders that shape this perspective.
Well, actually, as you have said, Ahmet Davutoğlu, the former Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister of Turkey, had a very strong imprint on the ruling party's foreign policy, which was formulated in the first decade of 2000s, and also particularly after 2011, when the Syrian crisis was unleashed. Since his removal, who is calling the shots in terms of foreign policy, since he is not he's not at the helm of anything anymore, and then probably is in trouble. For his future is not very certain. So it's a question, but it's a bit complicated because the foreign policy of the ruling party, AKP in Turkey, has still a very strong imprint of the days of Ahmet Davutoğlu, but he is not the prime decision maker. Even in the days of the Ahmet Davutoğlu, while he was the prime decision maker in terms of foreign policy, still it was important to take into consideration the strong man of Turkey, even then, while he was the prime minister, Mr. Recep Tayyip Erdogan. So any foreign policy, although it has been formulated by Ahmet Davutoğlu, it had to be in certain uniformity, and it needed certain endorsement from Tayyip Erdogan, and it had to serve to his political aims, and it has to conform with his personal outlook. So since Davutoğlu is no more around, if you ask me who is making Turkey's foreign policy, it is certainly Tayyip Erdogan, because he is not only the prime decision maker on foreign policy, he is the policy maker, decision maker on everything concerning Turkey and Turkish politics. So when it comes to foreign policy, which is a very important component of Turkish political stand, we cannot rule out that Tayyip Erdogan, calling the shots in every issue concerning Turkey, definitely is the one as the primary decision maker in foreign policy. But of course, in making his foreign policy, he has some aides that maybe he must be, I wouldn't say consulting, but at least kind of brainstorming. One is most probably the head of the Turkish intelligence, and the other is the chief of staff of the Turkish armed forces, because Turkey is undertaking or planning to undertake or projecting to make some moves within Syria, the military moves. Therefore, the chief of staff, General Akar, and also the Turkish intelligence director, Mr. Hakan Fidan, has to be close associates of Tayyip Erdogan in the formulation of the foreign policy.
And you said that Erdogan is the chief policymaker. So what's his vision of foreign policy of Turkey?
Well, actually, since some time for Tayyip Erdogan, because of the overall image of Turkey and his image in the international scene, and the difficulties that he's facing within Turkey itself, the main issue for him has to become to consolidate his power and survival. Therefore, the Turkish foreign policy, when we will be speaking of Turkish foreign policy, and as long as we speak of Tayyip Erdogan as the main decision maker of Turkish foreign policy, it has to be in relation for the objectives, the aims concerning the survival and the consolidation of Mr. Erdogan's power. So the foreign policy cannot be taken into consideration or evaluated without taking into consideration what is needed domestically for the survival and the consolidation of his personal power in Turkey.
So from that, I want to move on to a more specific question, a question regarding Turkey's relationship with the European Union and NATO. So recently, we have seen many rows between Turkey and European countries, especially with Germany. And also, we have seen many criticisms voiced by European countries concerning Turkey's increasing authoritarianism. Some have interpreted this as some sort of a policy shift in Turkey, getting closer more to Russia. So I want to ask you two questions. First, what is your evaluation of these recent quarrels between Turkey and European countries? And second, do you see in the close future Turkey getting more closer with Russia, or shifting axis from NATO to some sort of a Russian alliance?
Well, let me start from the end. Turkey already did change an axis, has shifted or drifted from its traditional pro-Western foreign policy. And when we speak of foreign policy, we shouldn't ever forget that Turkey institutionally is part of the Western world. It's a member of NATO. It's a member of the Council of Europe. It's a candidate member of the European Union. So there are strong institutional links, which is supported by the ideological vision and also economic and commercial relations. Since some time, we see very clear and apparent drifting from Turkey's Western ties, and Turkey today is a NATO member only in name. Otherwise, it is very difficult to call Turkey a NATO member given the signals and the confrontational frictions that occurred between Turkey and main NATO members. One is the United States of America, which is considered as the patron of the transatlantic alliance, and the Turkish and the American positions diverge a lot. They do not converge at all, or mostly they don't converge on the Syrian playground, which is the main international issue nowadays. So apart from United States, the most important element in the European structure, as everybody knows, it's Germany, and the frictions with Germany concerning the visit of the German parliamentarians to their military personnel in Incirlik is in everybody's notice. So, as I've said, I wanted to emphasize once again, Turkey is a member of NATO only in name, not more than that. When it comes to the relations with the European Union, which symbolizes Turkey's anchoring into the Western system, it is very difficult to describe whether we have to say it is frozen or it is controversial, it is confrontational, But for sure that when we think in retrospect, the beginning of the years of 2000, how Turkey was looking like from the vantage point of the Europeans, or how European Union looked like from where the Turks were looking at Europe in the years 2002, 2003, 2004, 5, 6. You can't make any comparison. It is not the same Turkish-EU relations at all. It is a relation in a live sport machine type of a relation. So there is already a shift in Turkey's the shift of axis in Turkish foreign policy. So you mentioned Russia. Of course, Russia, after a deterioration, a very dangerous deterioration, there has been a very close relationship. The most strikingly, again, on the Syrian playground. Yet, with Russia, we cannot say that Turkey has a strategic future. We've been in ups and downs with Russia in our history for over 400, 500 years, and there are very, very little periods of cooperation and closeness. The geopolitics hamper, and history and geography hamper this relationship to get to be a strategic relationship. Therefore, this warming up with Russia can be considered as a tactical relationship, but not as a strategic relationship. So, on one hand, there is a very apparent axis shift in Turkey, in Turkish foreign policy. The strategic relationship with the Western world is in tatters, while there is a strong rapprochement, a warming up in the tactical sense with Russia, without, but sum total of what we all add up to what I'm trying to say, we do not have any strategic vision of the Turkish foreign policy at all. So Turkish foreign policy is done on an ad hoc basis, mainly relying or dependent on the domestic immediate agenda, which might serve further consolidation of power of Mr. Erdogan or for the survival of its party and his political regime.
Okay, now from West, Russia and NATO, I want to jump to Syria, another important component of Turkey's foreign policy at the moment. So you have covered Middle East and Kurds for years and years. You have lived in several Middle Eastern countries. And we know that you very closely follow what's going on in Syria and Iraq. And we also know that like the close cooperation between the US and Kurds is not very welcomed by Turkey. The upcoming referendum of Iraqi Kurds is not very welcomed by Turkey, and Turkey in the recent weeks have mentioned that it may expand its military presence in Syria. And you just a few minutes ago said that Turkey is planning to start a military campaign inside Syria. So I wonder, with all these things we hear, how does the discourses fit with the reality on the ground, and what do you expect to happen in Syria and northern Kurdistan?
Well, actually, you in foreign policy, by some adventurous moves, you can create facts on the ground. So the problem is not whether the Turkish positions comply with the facts on the ground in Syria. Turkey, with the style, or at least the rhetoric that has been employed by its president and its leadership, mainly its president, can create new facts on the ground. So it is an issue for Syria, of course, when it comes to create facts on the ground. Everybody is a bit worried whether Turkey can, or Mr. Erdogan would undertake such a drastic military action further penetrating into Syria. Until now, not that he didn't want to, but his aspirations were contained by the presence of both Americans and Russians in Syria. But given that the international system is in turmoil, particularly in other corners of the world now, we are having a problem escalating between the United States and Northern Korea. And when it comes to another important flashpoint in international politics, Gulf, the Sunni bloc is just dismembered. There are two different axes. On one, it is Egypt, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates. The other one is Turkey and Qatar. So in the greater sense of the Middle East, there is such a chaotic and turbulent situation that at a certain conjuncture, despite that until now Turkish aspirations in Syria have been contained by Americans and Russians, it may not be enough, or it may not prevent a further action of Mr. Erdogan into Syria in the coming future. So it's still a big question mark how the things will unfold in Syria, but I do not rule out an adventurous move into Syria. So if it happens, as in the English saying, we will have a new ball game. There will be a different situation under new circumstances, so we will have a new ball game, a different one, and we have to speak again if it happens to be so. Until now, as I repeat once again, the Turkey do have intentions to go further, to finish off the Kurdish self-rule or the embryonic aspirations of the Kurds in Syria, and so it might dare to take a military action if it can convince Russians, or if it can find the situation opportune that the Americans could not prevent them to do so. When we get into Iraq, concerning the KRG's President Mesut Barzani's commitment to hold a referendum for Kurdish independence on September 25, just by today, the American Secretary of State Rex Tillerson asked the Kurdish side to postpone it. So we have to wait for a few days more to see whether the Kurds will comply by the decisions of the Americans. And as long as a person like Tillerson, who had been excellent CEO, who did deals with the Iraqi Kurds before, and so they know each other so well, and the Iraqi Kurds may not wish to alienate the United States of America as a friendly power. Two, that they don't want to just show their elbows against Rex Tillerson, who had been their close friend previously. Therefore, if they comply by such a decision, a demand by the American Secretary of State to postpone the referendum, not cancel, but postpone the referendum, then Turkey would not need to come to be in friction with the developments in Iraq. So it will comfort Turkey also. But if it goes as he is committed, if Mr. Barzani, as he is committed, then what Turkey may do? Well, again, since it has been escalating problem between Baghdad and Erbil. Tehran, Erbil, probably with Washington and Erbil, it is very difficult to think that Turkey will jump ahead of all of them and be in bad terms with its closest partner in the region, which is KRG. So I think in terms of the Iraqi Kurdish referendum and Turkish foreign policy vis-a-vis to that possibility, we have to be a bit more cautious than we had to be a week ago or 2 weeks ago to see how it will.
Mr. Çandar, thank you very much for participating in our show and sharing your views with our audience. It was a pleasure having you.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Thanks.
Bye. So now we will continue with the news of the week. This week, Turkey, Russia, and Iran held a meeting in Tehran to discuss the agenda of the next round of the Syrian talks. Iran, Russia, and Turkey, the three guarantor states of the Syrian ceasefire, convened in Tehran on August 8 and 9th. At the meeting, the agenda of the next round of the Syrian talks, which is expected to be held in Astana later this month, was determined. According to the Russian Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, the main agenda item of the upcoming talks will be the strengthening of the de-escalation zones in Syria. The trilateral talks in Astana were launched in January 2017 as a result of the UN-brokered peace talks in Geneva. So far, there have been 5 meetings held in the Kazakh capital, of which the last one was held in early July. The talks brought together the representatives of the Damascus government and opposition groups. Among the biggest accomplishments of the talks have been the creation of the de-escalation zones in Syria, securing the conditions for humanitarian access, and assisting the return of the displaced civilians to their homes. Somewhat as an alternative to the Astana talks, French President Emmanuel Macron and his American counterpart, Donald Trump, announced on July 13th that they were working on a post-war roadmap for Syria and were largely in agreement regarding the security and stability in the region. According to the proposal, an international working group will be established to outline a roadmap for the future of Syria. The chairman of the upper house of the Russian parliament noted that this proposal may be adequate, as long as it does not undermine the Astana initiative. Now, the latest developments in Syria. Following the military gains made by al-Nusra in northern Syria, Turkey has limited the cross-border movements at its Cilvegözü border crossing with Syria. According to Hürriyet Daily, the militants of al-Nusra, a group which Turkey considers a terrorist organization, recently took over the border town of Bab al-Hava from Ahrar al-Sham, a group which is cooperating with the Turkish-backed Free Syrian Army. Moreover, it had been reported earlier in the week that the Turkish military was building up military presence near the region. Although Turkish officials still haven't confirmed any military offensive into the region, certain media reports have been claiming that another military operation against ISIS and the YPG may be underway. Meanwhile, Ankara is repeatedly expressing concerns over the military cooperation between the US and the YPG, which dominates the Syrian Democratic Forces in the Raqqa offensive. Even if just for tactical reasons, the use of a terrorist organization in the Raqqa operation will lead to other terrorist organizations in the region gaining more ground, said Minister Çavuşoğlu early in the week. However, it has been reported that Russia has also started to put pressure on Ankara to accept the PYD as a legitimate member of the Syrian opposition to take part in the upcoming peace talks. According to the state television, TRT, the issue was discussed in a private meeting between Minister Lavrov and Minister Çavuşoğlu during the ASEAN summit in Manila. Minister Lavrov is reported to have demanded to add PYD to the list of the Syrian opposition delegation in the Astana talks, while Minister Çavuşoğlu is said to have ruled out the demand, stating that it's an unacceptable red line for Ankara. A German Defense Commission will visit German troops serving at the NATO base in Konya after a period of intensifying row between the two countries.
The Turkish government has given a German Defense Commission team permission to visit German troops at the NATO base in the central Anatolian province of Konya on September 8, after NATO-mediated enroll between the two allies. The Turkish Foreign Ministry said in a statement on Thursday, "The visit is being planned to take place on September 8 as part of a NATO mission with the participation of a senior NATO official. Talks on the details of the visit and steps to be taken afterwards are continuing at NATO." The Deputy Secretary General of NATO, Rose Gottemöller, will be leading the team of German lawmakers during the visit to the German troops. The chairman of the German Parliament's Defense Commission, Wolfgang Helmich, said on Tuesday that the proposal for NATO to lead the visit was made by the Gottemöller. "This is an important step in that it clearly shows the permission to visit among NATO members is a non-contestable right," said Helmich. NATO's mission in Konya provides intelligence support for the international coalition fighting Islamic State, and 9 German soldiers are stationed at the base. A row over access to German soldiers at Turkish bases had heightened tensions between the NATO allies and fueled a wider row. Ankara's repeated refusals to allow lawmakers visit German soldiers at Turkey's Incirlik air base prompted Berlin to relocate those troops to Jordan.
President Erdogan has initiated the preparations for the upcoming 2019 elections with a determination to reboot the ruling AKP after the narrow result in the April 16 referendum.
During a series of party meetings, Turkish President and the chairman of the ruling AKP, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, made important remarks concerning a renovation within the party on the way to the 2019 elections. On Monday, while announcing a broad change within the party organization, Erdogan urged the members of the AKP to put in a greater effort for the parliamentary and presidential elections in 2019. Speaking at the AKP's extended Provincial Advisory Council meeting in the Black Sea province of Rize, Erdogan said the 2019 elections would be the most challenging compared with previous elections. "We saw how hard it is to get over 50% of the votes in the referendum and in previous elections. That picture tells us that we need to tightly prepare for 2019, he said. This week, during his tour held in the Black Sea provinces of Rize, Trabzon and Giresun, he repeatedly warned about weariness among some party members. "I have expressed many times that I see indications of mental weariness in some of our organizations. We have to make a wide-scale change in our organizations, taking advantage of the process at our upcoming Grand Congress. As a party chairman, I am determined on this issue. We will continue on our path with friends who have the dynamism that is able to meet our nation's expectations," he said. In addition to these warnings about weariness, while addressing local AKP executives in the neighboring Giresun, he said all of his ministers, MPs, mayors and party officials should leave arrogance aside, act humbly when approaching people, and should put the interests of their party and the country before their own interests.
Medyascope's editor-in-chief, Ruşen Çakır, did an interview with HDP deputy Sırrı Süreyya Önder on the current political developments and the ongoing political pressures on the HDP.
Today, almost 2 times as many of our party members got arrested in comparison with the KCK trials that took place a few years ago. What can a political party do under such circumstances? Now we are organizing the Conscience and Justice Watch in Van. Normally, what would we do? We would call our local administration in Van and they would prepare the city for our arrival. They would make all the announcements, prepare the logistic, organize the necessary programs, and arrange the transportation and other matters for the attending deputies. Let me speak specifically about Van. I believe that this is the 4th local administration in Van that we are working with. I mean, the police has detained the whole local administration. When a new administration takes office, the police detains them as well. Immediately after the program in Van was announced, the police started a series of arrests. Therefore, when criticizing the HDP, it is important to acknowledge that we have no secret formula for doing politics. We do it with people. Among the other cities in which we organize such programs, one of the worst cases occurred in Adana. The police arrested all the members of our local organization, detained them for a very long time, and did not prepare the indictment. After a long period of detention, these people still didn't know what they were accused of. Meanwhile, two other teams who had replaced the initial administration got arrested as well. These arrests and detentions were so groundless that all of our released members were kept under house arrest. Therefore, all of our people with whom we can do politics have been disabled. Now we are only concentrated on protecting our friends and maintaining our political organizations at the local level. Thus, we sent all our deputies around the country to help the maintenance of our local organizations, which in fact is not their duty.
The government introduced a draft bill to authorize muftis to register and perform civil marriages, causing a major controversy.
The ruling AKP government introduced a draft law to authorize muftis to register and perform civil marriages. Deputy Prime Minister Bekir Bozdağ defended the bill, stating that the proposed rule will make it easier and faster to go through the official marriage process, and added that it will bring no change to the civil law. However, the Republican People's Party (CHP), People's Democratic Party (HDP), and many women rights organizations reacted to the draft law proposal, saying that it will inflict another blow to secularism and normalize underage marriage. HDP Adana Deputy Meral Danış said the practice would normalize underage marriage, while the Union of Turkish Bar Association's chairman Metin Feyzioğlu added that the society will be divided once more as those who get solemnized by municipalities and by muftis. Yet, Deputy Prime Minister Bozdağ denied that the change would encourage people to marry young, saying those who made such claims either do not know the change or are deliberately distorting it. Bozdağ also stated that the change will not decrease civil marriages, rather it will encourage them. Advocating the bill, Minister of Family and Social Policy Fatma Betül Sayankaya suggested that this regulation will prevent underage marriage and secure the rights of women, adding, "We just offer a choice to our citizens." Nationalist Movement Party MHP also voiced support for the government's controversial regulation. MHP Deputy Group Chair Erhan Usta said the new regulation, which will allow local religious civil servants of the Diyanet to solemnize a marriage, will boost the number of registered marriages.
The famous Istiklal Street has undergone a huge and rapid transformation in the recent years. The tremulous political events of the past few years have drastically changed the outlook of the once vibrant street and culture capital of Istanbul.
Istiklal Avenue, which is located in Istanbul's historic district of Beyoğlu, has been the beating heart of Istanbul for centuries. However, with the ongoing transformation of Beyoğlu, the avenue is rapidly changing and losing attraction. The shopping patterns have changed with the new age of giant shopping malls of the avenue. The locals have stopped hanging around, and most of the art and culture foundations on the street have closed. For many, the avenue lost its significant feature of being the intellectual center of the city. Recently, shops and cafes are closing on a daily basis, and the lack of tourists is affecting the businesses. Also, the distinctive businesses on the street have the risk of losing their buildings because of the changes in the Code of Obligations. Apart from losing reputation and the undergoing transformation, the businesses have also been heavily affected by the distressed environment set by the suicide bombing on the avenue last March and the July 15th coup attempt.
Now, let's have a look at what's on Istanbul next week.
Tonight, the first of the label project Techno event series will host two of the most in-demand DJs, Lenfaki and Paula Temple. Lenfaki is a Berlin-based DJ, producer and label owner, who is one of the most outstanding artists in the present age of techno. He is an internationally demanded DJ, whose productions and remixes are played by the most prominent names of techno. Being a resident at Berlin's prime techno club, Berghain, since its opening 2004, keeps him open-minded both as a DJ and producer. His gigs are an audiovisual adventure where he not only plays for the crowd, but rather performs for and with them. Paula Temple is a lifelong music technology addict who co-developed one of the world's first MIDI controllers for DJing. This Berlin-based techno artist has embraced a restless style of playing. She has been DJing for 2 decades. She spent the early years of her career as a vinyl DJ. Beykoz Kundra, in collaboration with Istanbul Silent Movie Days, hosts filmgoers at the open-air screenings, consisting of carefully selected movies from the history of cinema. The facility will be screening Fritz Lang's immortal movie Metropolis, Tomorrow Night, and Alain René's wondrous documentary All the Memory of the World on Sunday night.
That's all from This Week in Turkey.